He barked at strangers, until one night he named a killer. Welcome to Marple Mysteries. I'm your host, Harrington. Comment your city. I love hearing them. Wolfe listens to the silence. It takes a rare kind of courage, or foolishness, to ring Nero Wolfe's doorbell at 11:10 in the morning. That's an hour when the orchids are having their conference upstairs, and Mr. Wolfe is not to be disturbed on pain of extinction, slow and grammatical. I was at my desk, pretending to make notes from a file that didn't need them, when the bell rang. I gave it a minute, then another. Whoever was out there didn't ring again, which meant either class or desperation. I opened the door. She was about 35, tall, the kind of woman who wore her nerves like perfume, expensive and obvious. She held a leash, but the dog at the other end wasn't paying attention. A bulldog, grey-muzzled, polite as a banker, and sniffing the air like he was checking if the place met his standards. "I know this is highly irregular," she said. "They all say that. But Mr. Wolfe must see me immediately. It's about my dog." "Then you'll want the ASPCA. Mr. Wolfe's the sedentary type, doesn't do house calls, and his office hours don't begin until, well, when I say they do." She looked at me like people do when they realize sarcasm isn't going to help them. "Please, my name is Iris Kendall. I was told Mr. Wolfe solves problems no one else will touch. This isn't about a dog in the usual sense." The bulldog looked up at her, then at me, and gave a grunt like he agreed. That grunt did it. I've seen people talk themselves out of seeing Wolfe, but never a dog try to talk himself in. "Wait here," I said, and left her in the hall. Wolfe was upstairs, communing with his orchids. The only thing more sacred than that hour is the dinner hour, and even then it's a close race. I took the liberty of breaking the embargo because, for one thing, it wasn't every day someone brought a bulldog to the door like an offering, and for another, Wolfe liked puzzles that pretended not to be. He was bending over a dendrobium when I arrived, looking like a mountain range in motion under his yellow smock. "Archie," he said without turning, "you are early, or someone is inconsiderate." "Which?" "The latter. A woman and a bulldog downstairs. She says it's about the dog, but she's got that look that says it isn't. Wants to see you now." His shoulders moved, not quite a sigh, more a tremor of disapproval. "Goodwin, you know the ritual. 11-1 is sacrosanct." "Sure, but maybe this one has her own religion, and the dog's civilized, doesn't bark, might even take notes." That earned me a glare over his shoulder. "Phooey. Dogs are nuisances, loyal, noisy, and malodorous. I do not—" She said someone told her you take the impossible cases, and she's carrying it, whatever it is, on a leash. Seems unique enough for a morning distraction. He straightened. "Distraction," he repeated, tasting the word like it was vinegar. "Very well. Bring them in. But if the animal trespasses beyond the rug, I will have Fritz fumigate the premises." By the time I got them settled in the office, Wolfe was in his chair, looking like an emperor reluctantly entertaining barbarians. The bulldog sat at his owner's feet, watching Wolfe with a kind of wary fascination. Wolfe's eyes flicked to the dog, then to Iris Kendall. "Madam, please state the nature of your intrusion." She clasped her gloves together tightly. "It's about this dog. His name is Buster. He's been saying names." That got Wolfe's eyebrows to rise about half an inch, which for him was like a man doing a double take. I stayed standing because this was about to get good. "Names?" Wolfe said. "Dogs do not talk, madam." "I know how it sounds," she said quickly. "But he reacts, barks, growls, sometimes whines when he hears certain names. My late husband's name, for instance, and the name of a man who shouldn't be alive." Wolfe closed his eyes. "Archie, why do you bring me these? Surely the city is large enough for charlatans to find other receptacles." But her voice cracked. "Mr. Wolfe, My husband died 6 months ago, and yesterday, when I spoke the name of his former business partner, whom I haven't seen since the funeral, Buster went wild. I thought it was coincidence. But then this morning I got a note. No signature. Just 3 words. He knows names. That earned a full opening of Wolfe's eyes. Indeed. Iris looked between us. Mr. Wolfe, someone is using my dog to frighten me, or warn me. I don't know which, but I'm certain it's not madness. Wolfe pressed his fingertips together, his gaze moving to Buster, who was sitting very still now, head tilted, as if he'd just recognized the sound of his own story. Wolfe spoke softly. Archie, have Miss Kendall and her companion wait in the front room, then return. When she was gone, Wolfe said, We have, it seems, a woman in fear, a dog with an improbable talent, and a note that presumes sentence. Phooey. Fetch Saul Panzer, and tell Fritz to prepare beer. I suspect this morning will not improve. If you've ever seen Nero Wolfe interrupted before noon, you know it's a violation of a natural law. From 11 to 1 he belongs to his orchids, and any intrusion ranks somewhere between blasphemy and burglary. So when the bell rang at 10:47 a.m., and I opened the door to find Iris Kendall, her bulldog, and an air of expensive panic, I knew the day was doomed. She sat now in Wolfe's office, smoothing her gloves while Buster, the bulldog, snored on the rug. Wolfe regarded them as if civilization itself had regressed. Madam, he said, dogs are tolerated here only under protest. Proceed. It's not the dog, Mr. Wolfe. It's what someone's doing with him. Her voice was tight, but not theatrical. He reacts to names. My husband's, his partner's, and I've received 2 anonymous notes saying he knows names. That got Wolfe's eyebrows halfway up, which for him was like a man standing on his chair. Dogs don't know names, madam. Maybe not, she said, but someone thinks mine does, and they're using it to frighten me. Wolfe's sigh came from somewhere near his diaphragm. Archie, see that Mrs. Kendall is not insane. I've tried, I said. No luck. Before Wolfe could dismiss the whole business as canine melodrama, the front bell rang again. A messenger handed me a padded envelope addressed in the same block letters to Buster. Inside was a photograph of a boardroom, men in suits, a nameplate reading Leonard Kendall, and on the back, Say Ambrose Vale. I laid it on Wolfe's desk. Buster looked at it and made a low, thoughtful sound, somewhere between a growl and a prayer. Ambrose Vale? Wolfe asked. My husband's partner, Iris said. After Leonard died, Ambrose vanished from the firm. I haven't seen him since the funeral. Your husband's death? Wolfe asked mildly. Collapsed at a luncheon. Heart failure, but he was healthy. Too healthy. Wolfe's eyes closed, calculating. Archie, read a list of names. Let us test this prodigy. I took a pad. Iris supplied names. Vale, the firm's counsel, Nicole Brandt, their PR woman, Marla Chen, an investor, Trevor DeWitt, and a consultant called Pratt. For mischief, I added Nero Wolfe and Fritz Brenner. I read them aloud one by one. Buster blinked at some, ignored others. But at Ambrose Vale he stiffened, stood, and gave that same low hum while staring at the photograph. Wolfe murmured. Not magic, conditioning. Someone has trained the dog to react to that name. Trained him. Why? Iris asked. To make you afraid. Fear breeds foolishness. I was about to agree when the front door opened without a ring, a capital offense in the brown stone. I met a woman in a tailored suit, expression like a steel rule. Nicole Brandt, she said, counsel to the Kendall estate. She brushed past me into the office. Iris, I told you not to bring this circus here. I needed help, Iris snapped. The notes, the photo. Nicole spotted the picture, turned it over, read the scrawl, and went a shade paler. You should have called me first. Too late, Wolfe said. You're here. Sit. I prefer to stand. Then stand, Wolfe said pleasantly. She did. I liked her instantly. Nicole admitted that Iris had received anonymous emails during probate, warnings not to interfere with her husband's affairs. She'd told her client to ignore them to avoid, as she put it, legal complications. Pfui, Wolfe said. A man dies. A partner disappears. Now the widow is haunted by a illiterate dog. Hardly legal, merely human. Nicole frowned. Mr. Wolfe, this will become a court matter if you stir it. Decline the case and we'll all be grateful. Wolfe pressed a finger to his temple. Miss Brandt, gratitude is a poor currency. I accept the case. Iris exhaled like someone just cancelled an execution. Nicole didn't, but her eyes said she wanted to. Terms? I asked. Usual, Wolfe said. Commensurate with the annoyance, which is already considerable. Nicole handed over a folder, neat as her diction, probate papers, trust abstracts, one police report, and an article about Kendall and Vale's strategic reorganization. Translation: the ship sank politely. 4 days before Leonard died, Nicole added. He and Ambrose argued behind closed doors. No one knows about what. Leonard looked finished afterward. That's where you start, Wolfe told me. Vale and this consultant, Pratt. Sure, I said. Anyone who brands himself consultant deserves scrutiny. Wolfe nodded once. Mrs. Kendall, the dog stays here for the afternoon. If he has been used as an instrument, I wish to hear what tune he plays when the musician is absent. She hesitated. Nicole surprised us both by saying softly, "It might be safer." Buster thumped his tail twice, filing a motion of approval. I told Fritz we were boarding a bulldog for lunch. He didn't cheer. As Iris and Nicole left, the air began to return to its rightful composition. That's when the phone rang. Goodwin, I said. A smooth voice. Tell Mr. Wolfe the dog is clever, but clever dogs are dangerous. They know names, and names open doors you can't close again. Fine, I said. We like ventilation. Click, I hung up. Wolfe's eyes went flat as coins. We are being baited, he said. Archie, cut the line. Begin with Ambrose Vale. Bring me words from his own mouth, transcribed by yours. I took my hat. You sure you'll be okay alone with the witness? Goodwin, he said. If that animal chews a rug, it will be your salary. Buster yawned. I grinned. Then let's hope he prefers lawyers. The cab dropped me in front of an office building that looked like it sold integrity by the square foot. Glass facade, polished brass directory, and a doorman who could pass for an usher at a corporate funeral. Ambrose Vale's name was still on the listing beside Kendall and Vale Capital, but the firm itself had been officially dissolved. Someone was still paying rent, though, because the lights on the 15th floor were on and steady. I told the receptionist I was there on behalf of Mrs. Kendall about a personal matter. That phrase has a way of clearing calendars. 5 minutes later, Ambrose Vale appeared, tall, elegant, and groomed to a shine that suggested he trusted mirrors more than people. His handshake was cool and measured, the kind that tests if you're about to cause trouble. Archie Goodwin, I said. I work for Nero Wolfe. His mouth twitched. Maybe amusement, maybe dread. Wolfe, the detective who doesn't leave his chair. I've heard of him. Should I be flattered or concerned? Depends, I said. Do you send anonymous notes to widows and dogs? That cracked the polish a little. His eyes narrowed. I beg your pardon? I gave him the short version, minus the mystical dog part, because I wanted to see where he'd jump. When I mentioned the photo with his name scrawled on the back, he froze like I'd opened a drawer labeled Guilty Conscience. Then the smooth tone returned, thinner now. I've sent nothing. Leonard's death was a tragedy, but the company's affairs are closed. I have no quarrel with Iris. Maybe not, but someone does, and they're using your name to play ventriloquist with a bulldog. He almost smiled. A bulldog. Yeah. Stout, quiet, reacts like a seismograph when your name's mentioned. That did it. For a moment, fear replaced the polish. Then he looked past me, toward the office door, where a secretary was pretending not to listen. "Mr. Goodwin," he said softly, "if you value your client, tell her to stop digging." Leonard's heart gave out, yes, but not because of me. There were other pressures. Things I can't prove without hurting the wrong people. "Try me," I said. "I collect wrong people." He hesitated, weighing risk and reputation. Leonard was going to dissolve the firm and expose certain investors, silent partners with loud money. When he died, those records vanished. I thought Iris destroyed them to protect his name. If she didn't... He didn't finish. He didn't have to. When I left, his secretary watched me go with the expression of someone counting potential alibis. I made a note to check her name later. Back at the brownstone, Buster had settled near Wolfe's chair, snoring like a faulty engine. Wolfe was reading case notes with the disapproval of a man forced to tolerate reality. "Ambrose?" he asked without looking up. Nervous, polished, and too smart to lie cleanly. Claims Leonard planned to expose shady investors before his ticker gave up. The records are missing. My guess. Someone wanted them missing more than they wanted Leonard breathing. Wolfe's eyes lifted. And the dog? Still here. Loyal as a priest. He leaned back, fingertips together. Then our saboteur knows we are interested. He or she telegraphed it through your telephone call. You will next visit this consultant, Pratt. Someone that's self-assured must leave prints. I nodded. Anything else? Yes. Mrs. Kendall must be warned to expect a reprisal. The dog's presence here may provoke a reaction from whoever trained him. They will come for their instrument or silence it. I gave him a look. You think someone will break into this house for a bulldog? Wolfe's mouth twitched. If they do, Goodwin, they will discover that my aversion to violence does not extend to trespass. As I left to track down Pratt, Buster stirred, lifting his head and giving a low growl toward the window, deep, uneasy, almost human. Wolfe turned slightly, eyes narrowing, then murmured, "So, the next move." I didn't argue. In that house, when the dog growled first, it usually meant the world was about to misbehave. The address Wolfe gave me for Pratt turned out to be a co-working suite off Madison Avenue, one of those glass cubes where consultants pretend to run empires between espressos. His name was stenciled on the door. Edward Pratt, Strategic Alignment. Inside, he was aligning himself with a young client's patience, talking about narrative value, while his hands performed ballet above a tablet. When I introduced myself and mentioned Nero Wolfe, he dismissed the client with a smile sharp enough to draw blood. "Ah, the detective," he said, "the sedentary philosopher. What's his interest in me?" "Leonard Kendall," I said, "and Ambrose Vale. I'm checking who might have wanted the Kendall and Vale partnership to go from ampersand to obituary." Pratt leaned back. His eyes were pale and restless, the kind that chase their own reflection. "Tragedy," he said. "Leonard was too earnest for finance. Ambrose too theatrical. Their firm was a marriage of spreadsheets and ego. I only advised them to control the narrative after the SEC started sniffing. Sniffing for what? Nothing proved," he said smoothly. "Rumors of offshore accounts, creative valuation, you know the type. Leonard didn't have the stomach for it. He wanted to come clean. Ambrose didn't." That lined up neatly with what Vale had told me. But too neatly, like a bed someone remade just before inspection. I said, "You were at the charity luncheon where Leonard collapsed." He gave me a slow nod. "I was." He excused himself during dessert. When they carried him out, Ambrose looked like he'd swallowed ice water. The death certificate said heart failure, Convenient, no? Convenient for who? I asked. For anyone with skin in Kendall and Vale's accounts, he said, and smiled again. Including me, if you must know. I lost a retainer when Leonard died. I thanked him and left before the smile started charging rent. On the street, I called Wolfe. He answered after the second ring, which meant he'd been waiting. Well, he said. Pratt paints Ambrose as the villain. Ambrose paints Pratt as the opportunist, and they both look varnished. Pratt confirmed the SEC angle and said Leonard was ready to confess something before he died. A confession of fraud? Maybe, or guilt. Hard to tell with people who think morality is a tax bracket. There was a pause. Then Wolfe's voice, low and precise. Return at once. We have had company. I didn't waste time. When I reached the brownstone, the air was sharp with tension. Fritz met me in the hall, face tight. Someone came while you were out, he said. A man. He asked for you. He said he was from the paper. I told him no interviews. Then he asked if the dog was still here. My hand went cold. What did you tell him? Nothing, Fritz said. But when I went to the kitchen, he vanished. I headed straight to the office. Wolfe sat at his desk, still as a judge. Buster lay near the window, silent. I saw it immediately. His collar had been loosened. Fritz found it that way, Wolfe said. Someone entered. The lock was not forced. They knew what they sought. The dog, or what he carried. I knelt beside Buster. Under the collar was a small metal capsule, no bigger than a pen cap. Inside, folded tight, a strip of the same fine vellum as the first note. This one read, he remembers what he saw. I looked up at Wolfe. Somebody's using the dog as a messenger. Yes, he said quietly. And now they fear he may deliver more than they intended. I slipped the capsule into an envelope. You think the intruder was the same voice that called me? I think, Wolfe said, that our adversary is growing impatient. A reckless man would threaten. A clever one sends reminders. Which kind are we dealing with? Wolfe's eyes went to Buster, the kind who trains a dog to recognize names. We are dealing with both. The bulldog shifted, snorted softly, and settled again. Wolfe reached for his beer, the signal that thought was coiling tight behind his calm. Goodwin, he said, tomorrow you will call on Miss Brandt. Tell her I require the Foundation's full board list and donor records. If Leonard Kendall meant to expose something, it will be buried there. Our dog knows names, yes, but I prefer facts. I nodded. And if the intruder returns, he sipped once, unruffled. Then he will learn that even in repose, I'm not a hospitable man. The next morning began with the sound of Buster's claws clicking across the office floor, which was one more sound than Nero Wolfe usually allowed before breakfast. Fritz had already taken to the dog, though he denied it. He'd slipped bits of ham into Buster's bowl, claiming it was culinary waste. Wolfe tolerated the guest like he tolerated thunderstorms, a fact of nature to be endured until it passed. I was halfway through my coffee when Wolfe called me into the office. He sat behind his desk, the morning paper folded in half like a conquered enemy. Goodwin, he said, you will call Miss Brandt at 10. Inform her that I require the donor and board records for the City Youth Initiative. Already ahead of you, I said. She agreed to meet me at noon, her office downtown. And she didn't sound thrilled. Wolfe's lips twitched. Few people sound thrilled when you telephone them. Maybe it's my charm, or maybe they've heard about your rates. He ignored that and glanced toward the window where Buster was, sprawled, chin on paws, staring at nothing. The capsule you discovered, Wolfe said, was placed deliberately. Someone wanted it found, but not immediately. That suggests foresight and fear of exposure. The note's wording, he remembers what he saw, is a warning or a boast. Determine which. I nodded. I'll shake the tree. Maybe Miss Brandt drops a few legal apples. Do so? he said, but without bruising the fruit. I want cooperation, not litigation. At noon, sharp, I was in Nicole Brandt's office, an orderly fortress of grey suits, closed doors, and the faint perfume of authority. She looked up from a file as I entered, her expression somewhere between polite and armed. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, "if you're here to harass, I have a calendar full of judges who owe me favors. I'm here for information, not harassment. Mr. Wolfe wants the donor list for the City Youth Initiative. Full board, last 3 years. She folded her arms. "That's confidential." "Not if it's murder." Her eyes narrowed. "You're escalating." "Only proportionally. Someone broke into Wolfe's house last night. They left a message in Mrs. Kendall's dog's collar. You still think this is about probate paperwork?" Her color shifted. "What message?" I gave her the line. "He remembers what he saw." Nicole sat very still. "My God," she said softly. "Leonard told me something once, a week before he died. He said he'd stumbled across an irregularity in the Foundation's accounts. Money routed through a shell fund. He thought it was tied to one of the donors." "Which donor?" "He didn't say, but he mentioned a name. Ambrose was involved somehow, and there was another person, someone outside the firm who handled the transfers. I never asked who. Then he was gone." "That's convenient timing," I said. She met my gaze evenly. "You think I'm lying?" "No," I said, "but I think you're rationing the truth." That earned me a sharp smile. "Fine. You want the list? Take it. But if Wolfe publishes a single word before I clear it, I'll have your office padlocked by lunchtime." She handed over a file folder and looked away as I took it. I thanked her, but she didn't answer. The moment I left, her phone started ringing. She picked it up too fast. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was waiting, eyes half closed, listening as I read out the names. Donors, board members, silent partners. When I reached the last page, he lifted a hand. "Repeat the final 3. Larrabee, Thomas, DeWitt, Trevor, Pratt, Edward." "Phooey," Wolfe muttered. "Predictable, all with motive, all with opportunity, and all linked to our deceased through money." He leaned forward, tapping the vellum note on his desk. "Goodwin, this phrase, 'he remembers what he saw,' I begin to suspect it is literal." "You mean the dog actually saw something?" "Precisely, not the impossible, but the unnoticed. Something in that conference room photograph." I glanced at the photo again. Leonard Kendall, smiling too tightly, Ambrose at his shoulder. 6 others arranged in polite formation, the same black nameplate, the same glass of water, the same... I stopped. In the reflection of a side mirror behind them, barely visible, was a hand holding a phone aimed at the table. I whistled. Someone was recording. Wolfe's eyes gleamed. "Indeed, and whoever trained the dog knew it. Retrieve that recording, Goodwin, and we will have more than words. We will have a witness, one who does not lie, but cannot speak." Buster lifted his head, blinked once, and gave a low, deliberate growl. Wolfe inclined his head slightly, almost in respect. "Yes," he said quietly. "Quite so." I spent the next morning trying to find the photographer who'd taken that boardroom picture. The glossy print had no watermark, but the file folder Nicole gave me included the event details. City Youth Initiative, Midtown Conference Center, March 14th. A little persuasion with the event coordinator and a few harmless lies got me the name of the hired camera, a freelancer named Milo Trent, address in Queens. By noon, I was standing at his door. He answered wearing a bathrobe patterned with paint stains and caffeine. "Pictures from the Kendall event?" I asked. "You took them?" "Yeah," he said, scratching his chin. "Paid cash by a woman from the PR team. Marla, something." "Jen," I said. "That's it. She picked the shots, paid, told me to delete the rest. I didn't, of course." He smiled a little. "Why?" Because deleted files pay less than the live ones, I said. You still have them? He hesitated, reading me. Who are you? Archie Goodwin, working for Nero Wolfe. He blinked, maybe recognizing the name. All right, I've got backups, but if this gets me sued, it won't, I said. Probably. He plugged in an old hard drive and scrolled through thumbnails. There, that meeting. Want a copy? Show me first. He opened a sequence of shots, half-candids, half-posed. Most were harmless corporate smiles, but the final few caught my eye. Ambrose Vale standing at the far end, leaning toward Leonard Kendall, who looked pale and furious. Between them, slightly blurred, was a hand clutching a small black recorder. Can you zoom that? I asked. Milo did. The recorder's model logo was faint but legible. I jotted it down. Keep these safe, I told him. And if anyone comes asking, forget we talked. He laughed. Buddy, I forget everything after coffee. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe listened to my report without moving more than an eyebrow. So, the dog's reaction, the reflection, and now a recording device. We have coherence. Find the recorder. That's the next trick. But whoever had it, Marla Chen maybe, didn't want that evidence. Public. She paid to bury it. Wolfe closed his eyes. Then unearth it. You will call on Miss Chen. Be careful. PR practitioners lie with rhythm. It can be soothing. Marla's office was on the east side, decorated like a magazine spread. Modern, glassy, and faintly perfumed with manipulation. She was waiting when I arrived, sleek in grey silk, every movement deliberate. Mr. Goodwin, she said, smiling without warmth. You're late. I like to make an entrance. You said this was about Iris Kendall. I represent her foundation. What exactly do you want? Honesty would be novel, I said. Let's start smaller. Information. You hired a photographer for the City Youth Initiative meeting. You told him to delete the extra shots. Her smile didn't shift. Standard practice. We keep branding consistent. Sure, but in one of those extras, someone's holding a voice recorder. You, maybe. Her hand stilled on the desk. Just a fraction, but it was there. I don't know what you're implying, she said coolly. I'm implying that Leonard Kendall was being recorded without consent. He died 4 days later, and someone's been using a dog to send messages about what he saw. She laughed softly. Mr. Goodwin, that's absurd. Most crimes start that way, I said. Then people stop laughing. She stood, signaling the meeting was over. If Mr. Wolfe wants to play detective, he can subpoena my calendar. Maybe he will, I said. And maybe by then, you'll have misplaced another recording. Her eyes flicked up, sharp now. Be careful what you suggest. Always am, I said, and left. As I reached the street, my phone buzzed. It was Wolfe's voice, clipped. Return at once. We have company again. When I arrived, the front door was ajar. Fritz stood pale in the hallway. Wolfe was in his chair, motionless but not calm. On the floor near his desk lay a torn scrap of vellum, identical to the others, and Buster's leash, empty. Someone took the dog, I said. Yes, Wolfe replied, his voice soft and deadly. And now, Goodwin, the game ends. Fetch Saul Panzer. We will find who dares disturb my house. Saul Panzer arrived 20 minutes after Wolfe called him. If you've never met Saul, picture a quiet man with the face of an accountant and the instincts of a bloodhound. He could tail a ghost through a blackout. Wolfe briefed him in 3 sentences. Someone had entered the brownstone and taken the dog. Saul just nodded, asked for the leash, and left without another word. I stayed to get the details from Fritz. The intruder had come not long after I left Marla Chen's office. Fritz had gone to answer a knock. A man stood there in a delivery cap, said he had a parcel for Mr. Wolfe. When Fritz stepped aside to sign, the man moved like he knew the layout. straight past the front room and out again through the side door. By the time Fritz followed, both man and dog were gone. "He didn't speak?" I asked. "Only one word," Fritz said. "Sorry." That one chilled me more than threats. For the next hour, Wolfe sat immobile, fingertips pressed together, eyes half-lidded. He didn't like being robbed of property, especially animate property under his protection. I could practically hear the mental gears turning. Finally, he spoke. "Goodwin, call Miss Kendall. Tell her dog has been stolen, but not by common thieves, and tell her to come here immediately. Alone." I made the call. Her voice shook, but she agreed. When she arrived, she looked smaller than before, her calm shell cracked. Wolfe gestured her to a chair. "Mrs. Kendall," he said, "someone believes your dog carries evidence. Information recorded, or perhaps something hidden. That belief is false, but it will make them desperate. We must make them show their hand." She clutched her gloves tightly. "You mean use me as bait?" "Not you," Wolfe said. "Me. They trespassed. That is my grievance. They will contact you soon, likely to demand silence or cooperation. You will comply, outwardly. Archie will handle the rest." That sounded like a plan that would end with me explaining things to Homicide, but I didn't argue. The call came that evening. A disguised voice again, male, low, deliberate. "Tell your employer the dog saw what it shouldn't. It's done now. Forget the matter." "Sure," I said. "We forget things all the time. Birthdays, murders, stolen dogs." Click. Deadline. Saul returned 2 hours later with the leash and a photograph. A blurry snapshot of a van parked under a bridge. Buster visible in the back, unharmed but muzzled. The plate was fake, but Saul had followed it to a warehouse in Brooklyn owned by something called DeWitt Consulting Group, Trevor DeWitt, one of the names on the donor list. When I told Wolfe, his eyes sharpened. So the circle closes. DeWitt, Vale, Pratt, Chen, all tied to the foundation, all near Leonard's death. And DeWitt's firm now harbors the dog. Remarkable symmetry. "What's our move?" I asked. "We tighten the noose," he said. "Tomorrow evening, invite them all here. Say Mrs. Kendall insists on a meeting about the Foundation's future. Offer drinks. Flatter them with importance. I shall do the rest." "And the dog?" Saul answered. "I can get him back. Quietly." Wolfe inclined his head. "Do so. He is more punctual than most witnesses." Later, as I prepared the invitations, I looked over at Wolfe, who was staring at the empty space where Buster had slept. His voice came low and measured. "Archie, men kill for greed or fear, but when they train an innocent creature to carry their secrets, they reveal something worse. Vanity. That I cannot forgive." The next night promised to be crowded. By the time the clock struck 7 the following evening, the brownstone had been rearranged into an elegant trap. Fritz had set out his best hors d'oeuvres. Wolfe had ordered every chair precisely where he wanted it, and I double-checked the lock on the office door twice. Saul had done his part. Buster was back, safe, a little shaken but unharmed. He was resting now near Wolfe's desk, his eyes half-lidded but alert, like he was waiting for curtain call. One by one our guests arrived. Nicole Brandt came first, her jaw tight and her professionalism even tighter. Ambrose Vale followed, wearing confidence like cologne, though the scent didn't hide the nervous sheen on his forehead. Edward Pratt drifted in next, smug as a man who thinks he's too clever to be cornered. Finally came Marla Chen, composed and immaculate, with an expression that said she already regretted being there. Wolfe greeted them with a courtesy, just sharp enough to sting. "Please sit," he said, motioning toward the semicircle of chairs facing his desk. "This is not a tribunal, though it may feel like one. You are here because you have entangled yourselves in a web woven around the death of Leonard Kendall. I intend to unweave it." Ambrose gave a dry laugh. Mr. Wolfe, this is unnecessary. Leonard's death was natural. Wolfe's voice didn't rise, but the room seemed to contract. A man who dies days after preparing to expose fraud seldom dies of nature alone, especially when his dog becomes the recipient of messages written on vellum. That shut him up. Wolfe turned to Marla. You paid a photographer to delete files. Why? She didn't blink. Irrelevant photos. Poor lighting. Indeed, Wolfe said. Yet one of those irrelevant photos shows a hand holding a recorder. That recording still exists. That got them. Ambrose's head snapped toward her. Pratt's smile froze. Marla's composure wavered for a heartbeat before returning like armor. You can't prove that. Not necessary, Wolfe said. Proof exists in behavior. When Mr. Goodwin mentioned the photograph, your pulse leapt. I observed the same in every guilty soul who has ever entered this room. Nicole broke in. Mr. Wolfe, what's your accusation exactly? That one of these people killed Leonard? No, Wolfe said. That Leonard Kendall was murdered by omission. Poisoned not by substance, but by panic. Let me explain. He leaned forward, fingertips pressed together. Leonard discovered that the City Youth Initiative was being used as a laundering channel. Funds routed through dummy donors, shell accounts tied to Mr. DeWitt's consultancy. Ambrose knew. Pratt arranged the transfers. Miss Chen managed the optics. Leonard intended to expose them, but someone discovered he was recording that board meeting. Wolfe nodded toward Buster, whose eyes opened now, ears pricking. The recorder was hidden beneath the table. When Leonard confronted Ambrose afterward, he was warned, quietly but effectively. Days later, at the luncheon, he collapsed. Perhaps the strain, perhaps a stimulant slipped into his drink. Either way, his death silenced the danger. Pratt stood abruptly. That's absurd. Sit, Wolfe said softly. Pratt sat. The recording vanished. Wolfe continued. But the dog reacted to Ambrose's name because Leonard often repeated it in anger. Whoever trained him to respond to names wanted to create a myth, something to frighten Mrs. Kendall away from revisiting the past. Marla exhaled sharply. You have no idea what you're meddling with. The money, the people behind it. The people behind it, Wolfe interrupted, will lose their masks tonight. At his cue, Saul stepped in from the hall holding a small audio recorder. The room went still. Wolfe inclined his head. Recovered from DeWitt's warehouse, it contains Leonard Kendall's voice. He speaks of betrayal, of falsified accounts and names. Ambrose Vale, Edward Pratt, Marla Chen. He says he intends to deliver the evidence to the authorities. Ambrose surged to his feet. That's a fabrication. Sit down, I told him. And when he saw the look on Wolfe's face, he did. Wolfe's voice was almost gentle now. Ambrose, you did not kill your partner. You only frightened him enough to make his death convenient. Miss Chen hid the evidence, Mr. Pratt buried the trail, and all of you profited from silence. But silence has a way of breaking its leash. Buster let out a low growl. Quiet, steady, unmistakable. Wolfe turned his gaze toward Marla. You were the handler, Miss Chen. You trained the dog's reactions. When fear began to slip, you sent notes to Mrs. Kendall to maintain control. It was your mistake to bring the game to my door. Marla's lips parted, but nothing came out. The color drained from her face. Wolfe signaled me. I already had Inspector Kramer's number half dialed. When the police came, the confessions came too in fragments, Marla first, then Pratt. Ambrose stayed silent until Kramer mentioned accessory charges. Then he started to talk faster than I could type. By midnight, the house was quiet again. Buster lay asleep by the fire, snoring softly. Wolfe had his beer, and I had the distinct satisfaction of seeing justice, once again, emerge from an armchair. Wolfe lifted his glass. There are two tragedies in human affairs, Archie. The first is greed without wit. The second, wit without conscience. Tonight we entertained both. I grinned. And the dog? He, Wolfe said, eyeing Buster, is the only participant whose motives were pure. Buster stirred, sighed, and went back to sleep. I couldn't blame him. After that night, we'd all earned our rest. The night after the arrests was one of those strange, still evenings when even Manhattan seems to hold its breath. The brownstone was quiet, too quiet for Wolfe's liking. Fritz had retired early, and Saul had gone to file his report with Kramer. I was at my desk writing the last of the paperwork for our client when Wolfe spoke from his chair. "Goodwin," he said, "we have reached the denouement, but not the conclusion." I looked up. I thought those two words were synonyms. He gave me a patient glare. They are not. A denouement ends the narrative of action. A conclusion settles the moral account. And ours, I think, remains open. That meant he'd been thinking, which, for Wolfe, was equivalent to someone else doing a week's labor. He continued, "I've been considering Leonard Kendall. His murderers will be punished, yes, but the institution that enabled them continues unexamined. The City Youth Initiative was corrupted long before these parasites arrived. We will not restore his name unless we expose the root." "Which root?" I asked. "The donors whose money flowed through DeWitt's channels," he said. "Those funds were not just misused, they were placed. A laundering scheme implies a source, and I doubt these amateurs invented it alone." He leaned back. "Fetch Mrs. Kendall tomorrow. She deserves to know what her husband died protecting." The next morning Iris came, pale but calmer than I'd ever seen her. She thanked Wolfe with a composure that might have fooled anyone else. He didn't return the sentiment. Wolfe doesn't do comfort. But his tone softened. "Madam, you are owed the truth," he said. "Your husband uncovered criminal misuse of charitable funds. Those responsible are under arrest, but the money they funneled belonged to investors far more powerful than they." She met his eyes. "Can you prove it?" "Not yet," Wolfe said, "but I can point the way. You must contact the trustees and insist on a full forensic audit of the foundation. Insist publicly. Their fear of scandal will flush out the rest." She hesitated. "And if they refuse?" "Then I will publish what I know," Wolfe said. "The press will do what propriety will not." Her expression wavered between gratitude and alarm. "You'd do that?" "Mrs. Kendall," Wolfe said, "I am not sentimental, but the brownstone was invaded and a dog was stolen. Justice for your husband is an after-effect of my indignation." That almost made her smile. She left soon after, promising to act. When the door closed, I said, "You just handed her a torch and a keg of powder." "Yes," Wolfe murmured, "and I trust she will light it with precision. It is time this city learned what philanthropy smells like when it rots." He closed his eyes for a moment, then added, "Goodwin, see that the dog remains here for the week. He has earned his peace." Buster, at that moment, lifted his head and yawned. He'd been sleeping near Wolfe's chair again, like he'd found the safest spot in New York. That evening, as I was preparing to leave for dinner, the phone rang. It was Kramer. "Goodwin," he said, "you tell Wolfe those people won't make bail. And tell him one more thing. Whatever he's planning, he'd better keep it tidy. I don't like when he stirs the pot after I've skimmed the surface." "I'll tell him," I said, and hung up. Wolfe looked up from his book. "Kramer." "Yeah. He says don't stir the pot." Wolfe smiled faintly. "Then we are, as usual, in perfect alignment with the law's discomfort." He closed the book, signaled for Fritz's beer, and looked toward the sleeping bulldog. "There," he said softly. "The only creature in this house who understands restraint." I couldn't argue with that. I watched Wolfe raise his glass, the faintest satisfaction in his eyes. The case was over, but the lesson lingered. about greed, vanity, and the curious loyalty of a dog who had, somehow, known the truth before anyone else. The brownstone, at last, was quiet again. The next 2 days slipped by in deceptive calm. The papers ran stories about the arrests, splashing Wolfe's name across the margins as though he'd conducted a séance instead of an investigation. Wolfe ignored the publicity with the same disdain he reserved for sunlight. He spent most of his time in the plant rooms, leaving me to fend off reporters, well-wishers, and one radio producer who wanted him to recreate the mystery for a broadcast audience. I told her she couldn't afford the vocabulary. Iris Kendall called the third morning after the arrests. Her voice was steady, but there was something behind it, a tension strung tight. "Mr. Goodwin," she said. I did as Mr. Wolfe advised. "The trustees agreed to an internal audit, but one of them has already resigned. They're scared." "Good. That's the right emotion for them. Anything else?" "There's something odd," she said. I received another note. It was pushed through my mail slot. The same vellum. Just one sentence. "He still remembers." That froze me. "Don't touch it." "Bring it here." An hour later she arrived, clutching her purse like it held her last defense. Wolfe was waiting in his chair, already expecting her. She laid the note on his desk. It was identical to the others. The same block letters, the same smell of expensive ink. Wolfe studied it, then looked up at her. "Mrs. Kendall," he said evenly, "the men responsible for your husband's death are in custody. This note was not written by them. It is either an echo or provocation. Either way, it was intended to remind us that our work is unfinished." Her fingers tightened around her gloves. "Then you think there's someone else?" "Yes," Wolfe said. "And I believe that someone is inside the foundation still, attempting to control the aftermath. Fear of exposure rarely ends with arrests. It ends only when every beneficiary of the deception is removed." I was about to ask how he planned to remove them when Fritz appeared at the door with a visiting card on a tray. Wolfe took it, read the name, and grunted. "Well, the pot stirs itself." The card read, "George Larrabee." "Investor," I said. "He was on the donor list." "Yes," Wolfe said. "Show him in." Larrabee entered with the confidence of a man used to owning the table he sat at. He was lean, middle-aged, polished. His kind always looked like they were born in an expensive suit. He shook Wolfe's hand briefly, then looked around the office with faint curiosity. "Mr. Wolfe," he said, "I understand you've taken an unusual interest in the City Youth Initiative. I thought I'd clear up some misconceptions before they become headlines." "Indeed," Wolfe said mildly. "Then please, clarify." Larrabee smiled. "There's been talk of impropriety, money misused, names dragged into scandal. I assure you, every cent I donated was accounted for. The Foundation's recent difficulties have nothing to do with its patrons." "Pfui," Wolfe murmured. Larrabee blinked. "I beg your pardon." "Sir," Wolfe said, "you are not here to clear the air. You are here because you fear the audit Mrs. Kendall has forced upon the trustees. You profited from the laundering scheme, and now you hope to bury its trail under civility. Unfortunately, your arrival here has the opposite effect." The man's face darkened. "That's an outrageous accusation." "It is also a true one," Wolfe said calmly. "The recorder recovered from DeWitt's warehouse captured more than voices. It captured numbers, account numbers, 2 of them traced to holdings under your name." Larrabee took a step back, his voice sharp. "You can't prove that." "I can," Wolfe said. "And more importantly, I can compel others to prove it for me. The police will confirm it by morning." He turned to me. "Goodwin, inform Inspector Kramer that we have a visitor whose conscience requires assistance." I reached for the phone, but Larrabee raised a hand. "Wait," he said quickly, the smoothness gone. "There's no need for that. Perhaps we can reach an understanding." "No, Mr. Larrabee," Wolfe said, his tone glacial. We reached understanding the moment you crossed my threshold. The difference between greed and arrogance is that the latter believes it can buy silence. You will discover that my silence is not for sale." The room went still. Larrabee's composure drained, replaced by something smaller, fear wrapped in outrage. I called Kramer. By the time the police arrived, Wolfe hadn't moved an inch. When they led Larrabee out, Wolfe exhaled, a long, deliberate sound. "So ends the rot," he said. "At least for now." Iris looked at him, her eyes glistening but clear. "Mr. Wolfe, I don't know how to thank you." "Don't," he said. "I dislike gratitude. It implies debt." She smiled faintly. "Then I'll simply say good night." After she left, I poured Wolfe his beer and asked, "You satisfied?" He sipped once, eyes distant. "Satisfaction, Archie, is for fools and cats. I prefer equilibrium. Tonight, the world feels marginally less absurd. That will suffice." Buster stirred near the fire, gave a quiet grunt, and rested his head on his paws. Wolfe glanced at him almost fondly. "The only witness who never lied," he said softly. I nodded. "And the only one who doesn't need your lectures." He ignored that, of course. But as the house settled back into its usual silence, I could tell even Wolfe felt it. The rare peace that comes after truth has finally done its work. For 3 days after Larrabee's arrest, the brownstone was silent except for the soft thrum of routine, the orchids above, Fritz in the kitchen, and Wolfe in his chair, conducting his post-mortem on human folly. The newspapers ran the story to exhaustion. Investor implicated in charity scandal. Detective's dog uncovers fraud. Philanthropy and poison. Wolfe naturally read none of it. I did. Someone had to enjoy the fruits of our labor. On the 4th evening, Iris Kendall called once more. She arrived alone, without the gloves or the careful poise this time. She looked like someone who had been through fire and found her way out with only the essential things left intact. Fritz ushered her in, and she paused at the threshold of Wolfe's office, smiling faintly when she saw Buster asleep near the hearth. "He remembers faces," she said softly. "He growled at a photograph of Larrabee when I showed it to him this morning. I suppose even dogs know justice when they see it." Wolfe inclined his head. "Dogs, madam, have the advantage of instinct unclouded by intellect. They recognize the odor of guilt without requiring evidence." She took a seat. "The trustees have decided to dissolve the old foundation and rebuild it under new management. They've offered me a position on the new board. I think Leonard would approve." "Perhaps," Wolfe said. "If the work restores what his associates corrupted, it would not offend his memory." She looked at him steadily. "I owe you more than thanks, Mr. Wolfe. You gave me my husband's truth back." Wolfe waved it away with the gentlest flick of his hand. "Madam, gratitude is unnecessary. What was taken from your husband offended order. I detest disorder." She smiled. "Then I hope the world behaves itself for a while." When she left, the house settled again. Buster raised his head as the door closed, gave a short grunt of approval, and went back to sleep. I poured Wolfe's evening beer and leaned against the desk. "All tied up," I said. "Larrabee's confessing, the press is back to murders and mayors, and Mrs. Kendall's rebuilding her husband's good name. Not bad for a case that started with a barking dog." Wolfe took his beer, his eyes half-lidded with the satisfaction he'd deny if you asked him. The dog did not bark, Goodwin. He merely demonstrated superior discernment." "Sure," I said. "But admit it, you like him." He looked over at Buster, whose snores had developed a steady rhythm against the hum of the radiator. For a moment, something that almost resembled warmth crossed Wolfe's face. "The animal," he said, "possesses virtues absent in most men: loyalty, silence, and the good sense to sleep after a meal. I find him tolerable." "That's practically affection coming from you." He ignored me and stared into the fire. "This case," he said slowly, "is instructive. Vanity destroyed every culprit long before justice reached them. Vale's pride, Pratt's cleverness, Chen's ambition, Larrabee's greed, they conspired for profit and applauded their own ingenuity. Only Kendall, the dullest of them, had clarity. He saw wrong and sought to right it without ornament or deceit. And for that simplicity, he was killed." I said, "You'd think people would learn." Wolfe took a long sip, his voice low. "They won't. To most men, deception is easier than virtue because it demands only wit, not discipline." He gestured toward Buster. "There lies the only honest participant in this drama. He acted from recognition, not reasoning. Humanity might envy such instinct." I watched him for a while, then said, "You know, you've spent 2 weeks philosophizing about greed, betrayal, and canine morality. Maybe it's time for something radical, like dinner." He looked up. "Fritz has prepared coq au vin. You may join me if you refrain from commentary." "Deal," I said. He rose, slowly, deliberately, like a continent shifting, and went toward the dining room. I followed, turning off the light behind us. The room fell into the soft glow of the fire, with Buster curled at its edge, still and content. For once, the brownstone was at peace. The orchids upstairs would get their morning ritual, the world outside would return to its noise, and Wolfe would sit in that chair again, waiting for the next fool to think deceit could outsmart logic. As for me, I knew the pattern. Cases come, cases go, but the brownstone abides, and somewhere inside it, a dog who once knew too many names would sleep soundly, knowing the right ones had finally been spoken.